Roll for Crit presents How to Play Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile in 5 minutes or less, or more. Oath is the ever-evolving game of dynasties and uprisings designed by Cole Worley and published by Leader Games. Your goal in Oath is to gain control and exert your power over the land, but the specifics of how that will occur will shift from game to game. In your first game, you might try to win by ruling over the most sites on the map, but that's not your only path to victory. In this video, I'll be covering the essential rules mostly for first-time players, but keep in mind that this is a unique type of game in which the ending of one session affects the start of another, and even the setup as you see it here is not going to be the same every time. With that in mind, let's get into it. One player will take on the role of the Chancellor, while the others will be exiles, and everyone will receive the appropriate player boards along with a set of warbands in their color. These are the troops you'll use to attack and defend yourself. 3 warbands will begin on your board, along with a set amount of favor and secret tokens, and a marker to track your supply levels. Favor, secrets, and supply are your 3 primary currencies in Oath. Players also start with 1 face-down advisor card and a larger piece in their color known as a pawn, which will begin at one of the sites on the map, alongside some of the Chancellor's warbands. The map has several features you'll want to be aware of. First, the aforementioned sites. These cards which players will attempt to control and could be accompanied by other types of cards at their locations. Each site belongs to a region, of which there are 3, the Cradle, the Province, and the Hinterlands, each with their own face-down discard pile. At the bottom of the map is the round tracker, which marks which round of the game you're in, the Visions Drawn track, which we'll explain later, the World deck, and a deck of relic cards. Lastly, there are several favor banks depicted, each holding a number of favor tokens. Each bank is associated with one of 6 suits, which you'll also find on various cards. Next to the map are 2 banner tiles, the People's Favor and the Darkest Secret. You'll be competing for control of these banners, which could give you an advantage and even bring you victory. And then there are shared banks of secret and favor tokens, which are not tied to any of the favor banks on the map. You may have noticed this Oathkeeper title that starts on the Chancellor's board. The Oathkeeper title is held by the player who currently meets the conditions of the Oathkeeper goal, as indicated by your game's goal tile. In the first game, this means ruling the most sites. In order to rule a site, you must have 1 or more of your warbands on it. That's it. As long as you have a warband there, you rule that site. There will never be a situation where multiple players have warbands on the same site, and players' pawns do not have any impact on whom a site is ruled by. At the start of the game, the Chancellor rules the most sites, but if that changes at any point, ownership of that title can shift to someone else. Once ready, the Chancellor takes the first turn, going through 3 phases: Wake, Act, and Rest. When finished, the next player in clockwise order takes their turn, going through all 3 phases for themselves, and so on. For the most part, all players' turns will consist of the same types of actions and behaviors, but there are some differences between the Chancellor and the Exiles. One of those differences comes with the first phase of a turn, which I'll explain now: the Wake phase. In most cases, there won't be much for you to do during the Wake phase. It's the time to check if certain conditions have been met or not. If you happen to control the People's Favor banner, it will require you to place a favor token on it. Or if you can't, move 1 from the banner to the favor bank with the least amount of tokens in it. If the People's Favor ever has 6 favor on it, it flips to its mob side, which has you repeat that first step. You'll understand exactly how to get the People's Favor and why you might want it soon. The next part of the Wake phase has to do with that Oathkeeper title. If the Chancellor has this title, they don't need to do anything and they can move on. However, if an Exile has claimed this title by ruling the most sites, then during their Wake phase, they flip it to its Usurper side. And if on their following turn, they still have that Usurper title, they win the game immediately. If another player rules more sites than them before that happens, they take the title with its Oathkeeper side flipped back up. That makes this title something very important that both Exiles and the Chancellor will want to fight for. Lastly, certain sites known as opportunity sites are marked with this symbol. If your pawn is at one of these sites, then you get to take 1 favor or secret token present there at the end of your Wake phase. Next up is the Act phase, during which you can take as many actions as you'd like from a selection of major actions, which have supply costs, and minor actions, which do not. Actions can be repeated if desired and taken in any order, and you don't have to take any actions if you don't want to. In order to take a major action, you must first move your supply marker to the right a number of spaces equal to the action's printed supply cost. If this would cause the marker to move off your board, you can't take that action. The majority of actions are dependent on the location of your pawn, not your warbands, unless otherwise specified. Now let's go over what each action does, beginning with search. Searching allows you to draw and play cards, either from the world deck or the discard pile of the region your pawn is currently in. In either case, you'll draw 3 cards, discard 2 of them, and choose 1 to play. The cards that you don't play get discarded face down to the discard pile of the next province after the one you're in. This is true anytime throughout the game you discard cards. They always go to the discard pile to the right of where you are. If you're in the hinterlands, then you wrap around to the front and discard to the cradle. After discarding, there are 2 places you can play your chosen card: at your current site or next to your personal board as an advisor. If a card has this tree symbol, that means it can only be played at a site. If it has this person symbol, it can only be played as an advisor. The exception to this rule is if you play a card to your advisor section face down. A face down advisor won't have any effect right away, but can be revealed and played somewhere else later on. If you do play your card face up, it may have an ability that occurs immediately or that can be used later. If there is a cost to use that ability, such as in favor or secrets, it will be printed in this section. If a cost depicts a favor or secret token, then you must place the required token on that card. However, if the cost looks like a favor token being torn apart or an open secret book, that means that you must burn that resource by returning it to the shared bank. You can only have 3 advisors at a time, face up or face down, but you can discard 1 to play a 4th if you need to. Similarly, each site has a capacity limit. If there are already that number of cards next to it, then a new one can't be played there. If you do choose to play your card to your site, you'll receive 1 favor token as a bonus from the favor bank matching the suit of the played card. A card with the locked symbol cannot be discarded or moved in any way once played. Most of the world deck is made up of denizen cards, representing various aspects of the world of Oath, but there are also a few vision cards in there. If during the search action you hit a vision card, you immediately stop searching, meaning you could draw fewer than 3 cards if you find a vision during this action. This also requires you to advance the vision's drawn marker by 1 space. This marker determines the cost of searching through the world deck. Searching a discard pile always costs 2 supply, but searching the world deck becomes more expensive the more visions are drawn. Visions are special cards with alternate win conditions for Exile players. They can be discarded, played as a face-down advisor, or played face-up to your personal board. If an Exile has a face-up vision card fulfilled at the start of their turn, they win the game. However, all visions also require that at least 3 visions have been drawn before they can take effect. There's also 1 unique vision card called the Conspiracy, which can be played by Exiles or the Chancellor, and allows a player to steal from someone else at the same site as them, assuming the suits of their face-up advisors match the card's conditions. Your next action is Muster. To muster, place a favor on an empty card at your site. In exchange, you get to add 2 warbands from your bank to your board, which will be helpful later. Generally speaking, by the way, you cannot place tokens on or interact with cards unless they are empty, meaning they do not have any other tokens on top of them already. You can also use an action to trade with cards at your site. You can either trade secrets for favor or favor for secrets. Place 1 secret on an empty card in exchange for 1 favor from the bank matching that card's suit, plus an additional favor for each of your face-up advisors that matches that card's suit as well. Or place 2 favor on an empty card and receive 1 secret for each face-up advisor you have that matches that card's suit. If a favor bank is empty, then nothing can be gained from it. There are no individual banks for secrets, so they generally come from the shared bank. Next is Recover. Next to some sites are face-down relic cards, which have a cost indicated in the bottom right of that site. Pay that cost to place the relic face up in front of you. Unlike advisors, there is no limit to how many relics you can have. Relics have special abilities that can be used in various ways, but relics aren't the only things you can recover. You can also use this action to recover one of the 2 banners we mentioned earlier. Taking the People's Favor banner as part of the recover action requires you to place more favor on it than was there previously. The original favor is then spread equally amongst the different favor banks. You already know the People's Favor has certain requirements during the Wake phase, but the benefit of holding on to it is that when searching, you get to first discard a denizen from any site in your region, then play a card to any site in your region, meaning you'll have a lot more flexibility. The Darkest Secret banner also has a positive benefit. It makes the cost of searching the world deck 2 supply no matter how many visions have been drawn. To take the Darkest Secret, you'll need to place more secrets than it held previously. Then, take one of its old secrets and give the rest to the player you're taking the banner from. If every card at your current site matches one or more of your face-up advisors, then the Darkest Secret is safe and cannot be recovered by anyone. Otherwise, these banners can be taken on anyone's turn for the right price. Keep in mind that in addition to their abilities, relics and banners could both be necessary for some victory goals. Our next action is Campaign, which allows you to directly harm another player for 2 supply. First, choose any player as the defender, then declare your targets, i.e., which of the defender's holdings you're attempting to affect specifically. You can always target any sites the defender currently rules. If their pawn is also at your site, then you can target their relics or their pawn in favor. There's no limit to how many targets you can declare, but at least one of them has to be at your current site, and if the defender rules your current site, then it must be one of your targets. Once targets are declared, both players gather a number of dice depending on the situation. For the defender, sites and relics all have a shield in the top right corner, which indicates a number of defense dice. If the defender's pawn and favor are targeted, that defense value is indicated in the top right of their player board. For each target declared, they take that number of defense dice as indicated. As the attacker, you receive attack dice equal to the number of warbands on your board, although you don't have to take the full number of dice if you don't want to. Before rolling, if the attacker or defender have any battle plans at their disposal, they can use them now. Battle plans are special cards that may be present at sites with abilities to help with campaigning. Unlike other card types, battle plans require you to rule the site they're at to use them, and can be paid for even if there are already tokens on the card. After battle plans, both players roll their dice pools. For defenders, each shield counts as 1 point of defense, and each ×2 symbol doubles the shields rolled. Each warband at targeted sites and on the defender's board also add 1 defense point. On the attacker's dice, filled-in swords are an attack point, and every 2 hollow swords make up 1 filled sword. The skull symbol means the attacker has to kill a warband from their board immediately, which is why they might not want to risk rolling the full amount of dice. Compare both players' totals after rolling, and the higher result wins. If the attacker didn't roll well enough, they can sacrifice warbands from their board, gaining 1 attack point for each sacrifice. If you successfully campaign against someone, you get to kill half of the warbands used in the defender's points total, and put the rest back on their board. Then move any number of warbands from your board onto those now vacant sites. If you targeted relics, you steal them, and if you targeted pawn and favor, you force their pawn to move to a site of your choice, and half the favor on their board gets burned. If you're not victorious, then half the warbands on your board are killed, returning them to your bank. Now what about empty sites, you might ask? Well, each empty site is occupied by 1 bandit. You can campaign against bandits the same way you would against a player, adding 1 point to their defense for each of their sites you target. Bandits also use battle plans if available to them and free of cost. Bandits aren't controlled by any player and don't play a role at sites ruled by anyone else. Your final major action is to travel, by moving your pawn to another site. This costs a number of supply depending on where you're moving to and from, as indicated at the top of each region. If you move to a face-down site, flip it over. Some sites will tell you to place favor or secrets on them or new relics. Each site also has a unique ability that could come into play at different times. In addition to major actions, you can also take some minor actions with no supply cost. For example, discard one of your face-down advisors, or flip it to play it as you would during a search action. Some cards have action abilities printed on them, which you can take according to their instructions if they're face-up in your advisor pool, or they're at a site where your pawn is present or that you rule. If you rule a site, you can add or remove warbands from it as long as you leave at least 1 there. And if there's a relic at your site, you can peek at it before returning it to the map face down. Maybe you notice that the Chancellor also has an Imperial Reliquary board with 4 face-down relics and a Grand Scepter card. Whoever holds the scepter can also use a minor action to look at any of the face-down relics located here during their turn. The holder of the scepter also has a unique action to offer an exile citizenship in exchange for a relic from the reliquary and possibly other rewards to help sweeten the deal. This will reveal a new ability for the scepter holder and cause that exile to flip their board to its citizen side. That exile is now part of the Empire. They can no longer win through a vision card, and all of their warbands become purple warbands. With the Chancellor's permission, they can pick warbands up or even swap them between their boards when both pawns are together. At the bottom of the goal tile is a secondary goal for the successor to the Chancellor. If a citizen is able to meet this goal at the time the Chancellor would win, the citizen wins instead. A citizen can still campaign against the Chancellor, but citizens can also be exiled again. To do so, the Grand Scepter holder gives the citizen 5 favor, less if the scepter holder has the Oathkeeper or People's Favor tiles, more if the citizen has them. A citizen can even exile themselves by giving the scepter holder an amount of favor equal to their secrets and warbands. This flips their board back to its exile side as normal. Okay, so I know this is a lot to take in, but finally, once you're out of supply or you just don't want to take any more actions, you move from the act phase to the rest phase. Any favor tokens you placed on cards that round are moved to the favor banks matching the card suits. Any secrets you've placed on cards return to you, and you get to use them again on future turns. Then your supply marker moves back, up to a space on your track according to how many warbands you have in your bank, not on your board. The more warbands you muster, the less supply you'll get each turn. If you're a citizen, then you'll move the marker to match the Chancellor's supply instead. If you had any supply that you didn't spend at the end of your turn, then after moving the supply marker, move it an additional space for each supply you saved. If you have any rest powers on cards, they activate now too. Then move on to the next player to begin with their wake phase. Once all players have taken a turn, advance the round tracker 1 space. At the end of rounds 5 through 8, if the Chancellor has the Oathkeeper title still, they will roll a 6-sided die. If they roll the printed number or higher for that round, the game ends and they win. If the game reaches the 8th round, it ends and the back of the goal tile will tell you how to check for victory. And of course, the game could end earlier if an exile completes a vision or becomes the usurper, so look out. However your game ends, you'll then follow a list of steps to chronicle the results. Those results will impact the future of your game, altering the setup, player roles, sites, cards, and victory conditions on the table. Play with the same group or swap players in and out as you experience a constantly changing world every time you play. In conclusion, find advisors, muster warbands, rule sites, claim victory, change the world. That's Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile in a nutshell. Did you get all that?